I know I have one life. I want to live as many lives and have as many experiences as I possibly can in this lifetime. And I never want to be the author of my own misery. So I've always looked internally for the answers.
From To Be Magnetic, this is the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacy Phillips. As the leading destination for neural manifestation, we dispel the woo-woo in order to help you create real, tangible results based on neuroplasticity, psychology, epigenetics, and energetics. Our goal is to normalize the practice of manifestation and empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life in order to manifest the experiences, relationships, and things that most align with your authenticity. Part of our manifestation process entails expanding past your limiting subconscious beliefs. Therefore, by tuning into this podcast with interviews from experts, thought leaders, spiritual teachers, scientists, and those with neural manifestation success stories, you're starting the process of expanding your subconscious in order to see to believe that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, the process begins.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Expanded Podcast. Jessica here. We have another incredible process episode for you today. Today we have Gabriella Singh. So she has manifested a $10,000 unexpected raise at work, a move from West Hollywood to her dream cozy guest house cabin in Malibu, her dream car, a new sense of confidence, moved back to Australia, and more clients than she's ever dreamed of having before. But the thing that I really love about Gabriella's story is she shares how she navigated this work and unpacking the fact that she had a narcissistic father and really understanding what programming that she took on from that parenting dynamic, how to uncouple and separate herself from that, and understanding the limiting beliefs that came from having that. Whether that was the belief that she wasn't good enough, that it wasn't safe for her to be seen, or even the hypervigilance that the next shoe was going to drop and something bad was going to happen. She really went in and was able to reprogram and get to a new level and get to a new understanding. We also touch on the complex grief that comes along with having a parent that didn't meet your needs, how you can grieve the loss of what has occurred, and also how she has since lost her father, the complex grief of his passing. I think this is an incredible episode for someone who has really dove into the inner child reparenting work, especially for anyone who comes from either a loss of a parent or a parent that maybe didn't meet your needs in some way. There is so much insight and wisdom, and Gabriella has some really cool tips and tricks of how to utilize social media for your expansion. Before we jump into the episode, Lacy and I are actually going to dive into a little breakdown of some of the updates from the journal and the ways that we're utilizing the brand new journal that is launching today. So excited. You guys have been asking forever. Our waitlist is so long. We have a limited batch, so make sure to check it out if you didn't get a journal. So be sure to snag one in the link in the show notes. Welcome, everyone. So before we jump in today, I actually have Lacy on, and we're going to talk about our journal 2.0 that is launching this month. We had the first edition of our journals launch last November, and we have a podcast episode all about that and how to utilize the journal alongside this work. And we made a couple of key tweaks to this next version, so it's going to be even better than the last and really help you track and maintain your process. So, Lacy, how are you loving the new journal?
Well, I think it's really great in the sense that by now, most people with their first journals should have completed them. If they were using them, in tandem with the daily practice and the work to a T. So basically, we just really sussed out feedback, from the first buyers to see how we could improve this. And we really wanted to time this next launch and drop with the point where people should be pretty completed. So some really key elements that I think are worth noting that I think we were all on the same page with is a hardcover. So the journals moving forward are hardcover, this next launch batch. And something that I personally found that needed to be added is in the very first page under this journal belongs to, and you write your name, is my authentic code is, and you list it. And I think that's so big because that really informed the way that I engaged with the journal the last batch, and I could really, really use that, as we talked about in that podcast episode we had for the journal, that I literally use that to filter everything. So in the journal, there's a piece where we track tests that are coming through, for instance, and I'll filter those tests through my authentic code all the time. To me, my authentic code means these are the 4 pillars at which I vet everything through. And so, yeah, basically having that addition was really, really important to me. I'm loving it. I think this is one that's really going to jive with everybody at this point because it is so industrious. You can just throw it in your bag, your purse, your car. I had it on my floor for you recording this that I just tossed down there. So it definitely feels industrious to cruise through your life with you.
Yeah, I love that the authentic code's in there. I wound up writing mine in the first journal on that first page after you had mentioned that because I was like, ooh, that's a good idea. And I found myself, it's funny, like, your authentic code, but like sometimes you're like, wait a second, what is it again? And you have to like really think, oh yeah, what does that mean? Okay, how do I deepen into that more? And I love the idea of referencing your authentic code when tests are coming up so you can start to find your patterns of like what it might be touching on, what it might be hitting on. And that was one really cool addition that we added to this one was a pattern tracking page. So basically you can go in and start to, in one place, track any patterns that you notice might be coming up, whether they're themes and tests, whether that's a pattern that you notice right before you manifest. I was sharing with Lacy before that one of my patterns is if I'm avoiding doing the DI on a specific topic and unblocking my emotions around it or diving into it, and then I finally do, something always comes through the other side. So when I'm needing to bolster my trust muscle, I can have that pattern listed, look at my patterning page and be like, okay, I know if I do this, something will come through. So I have sort of like a reward on the other side for going in and doing that work that sometimes feels hard to do. And the other really cool thing is we added a lot more lines. Specifically on every page, we added more lines for free writing and tracking, but specifically the tracking pages and more tracking pages because we all realized how many pings, tests, and triggers we have as well as manifestations come through. So hopefully you'll be able to fill all of your things within one notebook this time for one season.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to share. We sent out a survey and we had fantastic feedback on what people actually got out of this journal. And I think it's really important to share those because I feel like I resonate with a lot of different categories of what people shared. Curious to hear what you resonate with as well and talk about our process around that.
Yeah, so the survey, majority of people who got their journals for the 1.0 version got them back in November when we launched or December during the challenge. So this time period in which they've had the journal has only been, a few months. And already 92% of them have already manifested. Now, they're obviously doing the work diligently because they are utilizing the journal, but just think about it that way. If you get a journal and decide now that you want to double down on the work, in a few short months, you can already start to see your manifestations come through. So I think that is super, super powerful. The other thing that was really interesting from the survey is that here's kind of a list of the top things that people felt they got out of the journal. It helped them to track their tests, triggers, pings, and their manifestations come through. They really enjoyed having the list, their manifestation list, to refer to while they're doing the work. Ease of access to have all of the TBM journaling pieces in one spot. For so many years, I've had so many TBM manifestation notebooks, and it's really nice to have one notebook that's having everything in it, the journal prompts, the list, the test, the trait, like every single thing is in there. And then when that sort of cycle comes to an end and you've manifested everything in there and then you're ready to write a brand new list, you can pick up a new notebook. And now you have these sort of TBM stacks of notebooks, which I think is really cool and beautiful.
Yeah. For you, what do you resonate with out of those stats?
The tracking for sure. I don't know if it's the Capricorn in me, but seeing data points and understanding and following along, like, okay, I have this ping. Did I act on that yet? Okay, yes, I did. Wow, I got all of these tests that came through. And then, oh my gosh, look at these manifestations. Like it feels like it gives me an up-leveled view of the TBM process. Like I've been doing it for years already, but having it all there, it's almost like you become an expert in your own process. Like you really see the details of what your patterning is, what's coming through when, and how to navigate. I think that was like the strongest thing.
Yeah, I'd have to agree for myself as well, because as somebody who, has just used free journals, this really brought the spider web together. The big piece for me that I realized, even as someone who's obviously done this so long and created so much of this, this process, for me, it was having to list my expanders next to my manifestations. When I am calling in things now, not only do I write out the major, but also the mini. In real time, I'll write out, let's say, a major manifestation, let's say the farmhouse, something I always talk about openly. So what it forced me to do was like, am I fully expanded? And when I was looking at the expander piece, it also helped me because I would take a couple of lines, right, to list out the major manifestation. So it would be itemizing like all of the things that I want. Next to it, the way that I used that in the journal in the expander piece was I would list out, do I have a full expander for this? What are my fragment expanders? What are my bridge expanders? So it was really, really allowing me to do the long form. And then on top of that, I looked to make sure underneath, am I unblocked enough? And then also, do I have any aligned action I have to take? So I feel like if one day there's ever a 3.0, we'll have to, figure out that funny process. But so the expander piece next to the manifestation, I really, really use that space in both the major and mini to list out and really get detailed about. So it's kind of like it's connecting all of the dots instead of each piece just, sort of floating around in a journal. So that was huge. And then the thing that I love, as someone who, like, it can be easy for me to be like, I get all of this at this point, but I don't. I'm working through it in real time like you all are. I'm still calling in things in real time. I'm certainly like the biggest piece I'm doing constantly is unblocking. And so for me, it was the new inventory exercises. They made me have to look at this work with fresh eyes. I hadn't done those in a bit. Like I haven't been through boundaries in a minute, and some of those exercises we have. So it was like, looking at my friend groups again. I mean, that's so big. I haven't done that, I would say, in 2 years. So it held me accountable.
Yes.
I guess that's the best word. Like the journal is a really beautiful first step for the person who hasn't gotten the accountability buddy yet. And they're like, oh shit, I need to look at all of this. And I'm being held accountable in real time in front of my eyes. That's what it did. It held me accountable.
I think too, it's for that person who, like, I have so many friends who sign up for the pathway and like dibble dabble here and there. And then when I remind them, like, okay, I'm going to go in and do it. But I feel like, especially with this next edition journal, I'm really going to push on them to get it, because I feel like if they have a tangible journal in front of them that's dedicated to this work in real life. I mean, so many things that we do is online, right? So it's easy to like forget to log into your portal and go in and do the work. But if you have that journal sitting next to your bedside looking at you, when you wake up, you're like, okay, let me track some of my stuff. Yeah, that's easy. And then you're like, oh, wait, I want to unblock this. And then you pop into the work. It really keeps you accountable by having a physical representation of something that you're dedicating to your authenticity. Like it's for your dreams to come true, So it's like if you just put in that work, keep it close to you or keep it out, it's really going to keep you accountable.
Agreed.
Okay, so I want to read one testimonial manifestation story, which I thought was really beautiful, of how this person utilized the journal and saw so much come through on the other side. This person writes, I'm an author, and one of my major manifestations is a feeling of effortless flow and financial support in my writing life and career. I'm moving away from teaching and hustling, ingrained in scarcity culture of the writing world, towards a quieter life, which I get to mostly work on books and longer-term projects. This journal has been an essential tool for tracking, because it's not enough to manifest the money. In order to really have the life you want in abundance, I need a rock-solid trust muscle and the ability to trust that the next thing is coming without needing to micromanage or settle for work that will bring me more certainty. This journal has helped me track those rocky experiences, constant car breakdowns, etc., and it's always the universe testing my trust muscle. Someday, this trust muscle testing becomes less and less intense. And in the meantime, the period has led me to receiving the craziest things. My first 10K on Patreon, another Patreon member out of nowhere buying me a $3,400 computer when mine broke, a free ski rental, half off bodywork sessions, free tacos, all timed to when I have done some brave in the flow, facing my fears, unblocking work, and followed a ping. I think that's so powerful that this person is utilizing to unblock that scarcity piece. They're referencing how their tests are popping up and what is coming through the other side to remind them the next time a test comes up, okay, I know this is a financial fear point, but instead of going back to that old job, look how money came through last time. Look how I was able to survive in this. I don't need to go back to that old job, that old way. And little by little, they're seeing that they actually are safe. They actually can expand and move out of that scarcity mindset.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from this, like how the journal is so instrumental in that, and we've talked about this before, but Dr. Tara really taught us this, to really, really cement new neural pathways or to root them. You have to go back and reread your journal entries.
Yes.
And I think that what's so key here is the way that we have this formatted. You're not wasting any time. And not that it's a waste of time, I think, to read through the full experience. But here, just as she did, you're only looking at the details, like your patterning, your trust muscle growing, the things that are just right to the point, that are so vital for you to cement those new neural pathways and to really, really, water them to grow, essentially. So for instance, when I look at my other freeform writing journals, they have my gratitude lists in them. They have my to-dos sometimes of what I need the next day. Then they have what's going on with me, but it's nothing like this. Like this is completely formatted with exactly what you need and the details you need to work through this process. And so that what you just read off was a really, really, really clear example of what that looks like and how it just speeds up this process. So I think that was so key what she shared, because a few things were happening in real time. She was reprogramming neural pathways in real time, based on, doing the long form work in the journal to look at her blocks. So unblocking in real time, working through those, then also going back and reading through to see how she's been expanding, and to also use that as a trust muscle to go like, wait, I don't have to go back to that old job. I don't have to do that. Like when I've been in this particular spot before, X, Y, and Z came through in this way. So there were so many things happening at one point. And that, I think, highlights why the journal for this work specifically is so important at tracking, because you're unblocking, you're expanding in real time. You're also really deeply rooting through science, new neural pathways, just as Dr. Tara would share with us all of the time. And then you're also growing your trust muscle, because you can go back and go, wait, when I was in this exact pattern in this exact space before, this is how the universe provided for me because I was doing X, Y, and Z. I don't have to do that again. So that was actually like the perfect, clear example of why, when doing this work, actually doing it through this journal, it just speeds up the process.
100%. Yeah. And one other tip that this person added in, which I think could be really helpful for anyone, is they said, When I see that I hadn't added a manifestation, a test, or a trigger to my tracker in a while, I would go back to my one friend who is also deeply ingrained with this work and ask her what she's seen that I was missing. So essentially, a kind of like a part of our missing piece in a way. So the journal is, she writes, so the journal is as much about what you put into it as noticing that you haven't put anything into it and reality checking and interrogating that. I usually find some things I miss tracking and get jazzed feeling into how there were actually manifestations that did come through the whole time that perhaps I was missing.
I think what's really cool about that is that that's kind of like a Heather, like the person who really gets this and goes above and beyond. I'm like, who is this person? This is brilliant. But that's really a huge piece because the journal's like your entryway into an accountability experience that acts kind of as her coach, the pair of eyes that can look in on her process and tell her like, ooh, you probably don't see this, but I'm going to look at it from a different POV. And here's what's going on. This is what I notice. To have the confidence to be doing this work and then ask, what we can obviously term her accountability buddy at this point, her accountability partner, what am I missing? What are you noticing? Like, what are the ways I've been expanding or little manifestations or tests or et cetera that I just haven't even, because it's becoming second nature, I haven't even noticed them lately. So that this is fantastic. This person,
I know.
So great. And really just a clear how-to of really engaging with this journal and using it to its greatest advantage to, again, hit on creating new neural pathways, unblocking, expanding, and, how to really, really flex the trust muscle while learning how to read your own patterning.
I just can't wait to dive into it because I feel like I ran out of space on the last one. I filled it up to the max and I didn't want to start writing my stuff in a new random notebook because I knew the new journals were coming. And I'm just so excited to really, really, really dive into this one and just start fresh. Like that feeling of having a brand new notebook to put your list. I looked back at my list from November and it's like, wow, everything I wrote in November, I checked off. So I'm just now checking off things that I've written on since November. Like maybe I added them in January, February or something. But yeah, it's really cool to see.
So yeah, if you haven't finished the first journal, this is your PSA of how to engage with it and finish it in real time to be ready for the second, because at this point would be about the point that you would be beginning to fill up the new one.
Absolutely. So check it out. You can find the purchase link in the show notes, and we're so excited for you guys to continue unblocking, expanding, and taking that aligned action so you connect with your manifestations.
Yay. All right, on to the episode.
Welcome, Gabriella.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica. I'm so excited to be here as a long-term TBMer.
Yay! So obviously, from the podcast, what is your sun, moon, and rising? The favorite question we like to ask everyone.
Yes. So my sun, moon, and rising are Taurus sun, Sagittarius moon, and a Taurus rising. And I am full Taurus, Taurus and Mercury, Taurus and Venus represent everything that it has to offer in the good and the bad. Then it's really interesting having my Sagittarius moon and my actually Gemini in Mars. I also have this kind of dichotomy as well, which is kind of reflected in my human design as a 2-4. So I'm a walking dichotomy is what I always say, a walking contradiction. So have that really earthy side of being chill and very grounded, and also have that kind of fire side to balance it out, I guess.
Are you it's Taurus season now, or it's almost Taurus season. Are you feeling into the energy of this time?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, I'm in Australia, so I think it's officially kicked off Taurus season here. And so fortuitous that we're talking now, because also obviously this year there are all the Taurus Scorpio eclipses. And so I always knew this year was just going to be a really momentous one for me. So I think, it makes sense. And I think even right now, the moon even might be in Sagittarius. I feel like I got a notification on my phone earlier.
Oh my gosh. That's
I know.
So perfect.
Exactly. It's meant to be.
And what is your cultural background and upbringing?
So you can tell by my accent, I am Australian. It's so funny because I think some Australians think I sound a bit American after living in the US for 5 years, which obviously not the case to any American. But I grew up in Sydney, Australia, which I feel so lucky to have done so. It's such a beautiful city. I grew up in kind of like in a suburb of Sydney that feels like a bit of a country town, which my mum always loved because she's from country Western Australia. And, I'm half Indian, half Australian. So my dad's we actually go back on the Malaysian side of our Indian heritage. And that was really interesting growing up in Australia because it's a very white country traditionally. It was really a bit of a challenge, to be honest, growing up in such a white community. I remember being 5 years old and crying to my mum because I wasn't white and I hated being brown. And so for a long time, I really just didn't associate with my Indian heritage except at home when I was with my grandparents in particular. And that's definitely been like a huge thing for me to like reconnect to and re-engage with. With the support of TBM, I think it's interesting because no one knows what my background is. So I've had everything from Brazilian to Greek and Spanish. And so that's also been interesting because people in Australia will look at me and say, "You're brown." And when I moved to the US 5 years ago, they were like, "Well, culturally, you're white." And they're like, "Oh, no, you're white." So it's been, I think, being biracial is something we haven't really discussed a lot in all these conversations around race in the last few years. And it's an interesting one because you never feel like you fit in either community. I stand out amongst my white friends and had that pointed out to me quite a bit. And then equally, though, like you're considered white, like amongst my Indian side of the community. So it kind of, is the start of what I touched on in terms of mentioning that I'm a walking dichotomy. I really have these two sides to me and trying to navigate that and trying to balance it, I guess, is always been a journey for me.
How did your parents navigate raising you with both kind of cultures? Did they celebrate your Indian heritage and allow you to like partake in that piece of it? What did you get from your parents in that regard?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, honestly, my dad had also disassociated heavily from it. He moved to Australia at 16 to train to become a pilot. Because we're Sikh, Punjabi, so Sikhs traditionally don't cut their hair, wear a turban. It's a really beautiful religion. It really believes in equality between the sexes and equality between everyone. And it really is so peaceful. Everyone's welcome in a temple. And it also believes that we are all, ultimately, no matter what religion you are, we're all praying to the one God. So it's very inclusive. But my dad really, when he moved to Australia, he cut his hair. I mean, yeah, he adopted a lot of like European habits, I guess. And he was always traveling and living a much more European lifestyle, I guess is how I'll put it. So yeah, I never had that encouragement except for my grandparents. They moved out here when before I was born or around the time I was born. Periodically Sikhs often experience attacks, I guess. And it's happened throughout the 20th century, every 20 or 30 years. And so they moved out here. And because of them, I would go to the temple and my grandmother was an incredible cook. So that was my connection to my Indian side.
And how do you feel like you use some of the work to reconnect to basically integrating both parts of you so you can see them as, oh, I'm not like, my peers. It's, oh, I have my own unique sense, about you?
Definitely through inner child, being able to engage with that girl who maybe had felt really isolated because of my skin color and my background, and really being able to like tell the story about how amazing it is. I mean, I think the word exotic can be really triggering for some people, but I kind of try and embrace it as like meaning special to me. I have so many memories as well, like in terms of, I had to be Jasmine as the Disney princess when I was little, even though I loved Belle, like that's what my family call me. and I had a bell ball gown, but it was like, well, you're brown, so you have to be Jasmine.
Wow.
And it was like, the Spice Girls and stuff like that. I was like, I want to be Posh Spice, but it was like, well, you're brown, so you have to be Scary Spice. It was just really, I had a lot of memories like that of being like put into this box that it was like associated with my skin color. And so it was really just like reprogramming those memories is like to allow myself to be what I wanted to be, but also equally being like, actually, there's no shame here. Like, it's so fun. One of the other things, I remember my sister, a year or so ago did one of those ancestry DNA tests. And this is something I always knew, that when Alexander the Great came through Afghanistan and he came into India, and that was the furthest he got in terms of, expanding his empire. And so that's why a lot of Punjabi people will have blue or green eyes, is because of having that Afghani heritage. And I knew that as a story, but actually seeing that on paper, that was another great reminder of being like, actually, like, you come from this long lineage that goes back thousands and thousands of years.
So you have family genetics that trace back to that kind of colonization from Alexander the Great?
Yeah, even my brother and sister, they have green eyes, so it goes all the way back for our Punjabi people in northern India. And, that's why I think in sharing my story, I was like really conscious of like, okay, why do I want to, even apart from the fact that I'm an avid believer and sharer of the work with To Be Magnetic, it's like, okay, what do I want to do and share my story? And I think I want to share like how you can take control of your own narrative and shift it. I think we talk about these days, thanks to TikTok, is like main character energy. And I just think it's like the most spot on thing in terms of using tools like To Be Magnetic and all the DIs and all this work, and to like really like break things down in terms of what you perceived and what they really can be, and how you can like engage in the story of your life.
100%. I think that's also one of the coolest things too, is getting to reconnect to heritage and tradition and history. And there's so much knowledge and wisdom I feel like a lot of people don't acknowledge on a regular basis. And I feel like now we're moving into different levels of generations where it's safe to reconnect to that heritage in a way that feels like we're integrating, which I think is really a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, it just makes so much sense. We've always looked towards the future, I think, often in terms of what we're working towards and moving at like a really fast pace and always looking to the future. But I think if you're trying to really excavate things, then you need to connect to the past.
Very true. So just looking at the list that you wrote in, you had a $10,000 raise without asking for one from your previous job, a Mercedes GLA when you lived in LA, 1-bedroom apartment in West Hollywood, guest house in Malibu with a garden, a job with 4 weeks personal time off, consulting career in business that doubled your 9-to-5 salary for all the people trying to expand out of 9-to-5s into multiple 6 figures, and most of all, confidence, releasing fear of being seen, playing small, and releasing fear over what other people think, and being able to say no. What a list. Oh my gosh.
It's been a long time. I found the work in 2018, and I think when I first spoke with you, I was just like, oh my God, of course, just take my money. Like, I get it. Like, I didn't need any convincing. I was like, this is what I've been looking for years, because since I've been 22 and finished college, and you go through that, like, oh my God, like, what am I doing with my life? We were all on the same track. And now all of a sudden we're just like wide out into the ether. And I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I don't know how to handle this change. And my internal world versus my external world, like, it was just such a struggle. So I've been looking for something like this for 5 years, essentially. And instead, what I found was, firstly, yoga, which was, it's a beautiful practice and a beautiful tool. And I, was a really regular yoga student, did my yoga teacher training, and I discovered Gabrielle Bernstein. And then that led me into Hay House, or like Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, all those authors. And for me, I'd had so much negative experience. And instead of processing it, I found some of that work allowed me to kind of skate over it with some toxic positivity, some light meditations. I never found it gave me the licensing to be like, these experiences you've had were terrible and that's okay. And you can shift it. And I think that's why with To Be Magnetic, I was just like, it just makes so much sense. I definitely have a lot of moments in my life where I discover something and I'm like, why doesn't everyone know this? Like, and so that's why I always just shout about it from the rooftops. And I've converted so many of my friends because I'm like, everyone needs to know about this. Like, it's just so obvious, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah. So I really dived right in. I mean, and that was before the Expanded podcast existed. And it was really like how to manifest, the earlier workshops, really dived right in. So that was probably June 2018. And then I think by September, I'd already felt my first wave of magnetism. And it's not to say that everything in my life was going perfectly, but it was like I was just on this roll of like fun things popping up. I think I mentioned like I went to the Emmys for work and I was in LA, but I was living in San Francisco at the time, and LA was just always more my vibe. So I was having fun in the sun and then, like downtown at these events and like having fun meeting people. And that's the person who I go back to and I'm like, okay, like what did that feel like when I was magnetic? And it just feels like you're in flow. You don't need to push anything. For me, it meant like, self-care, of course. I'm a Taurus. And yeah, that was the start of my first magnetic moment. And what that was at the time I was really looking for a relationship. I remember like I would meet a guy like going on a hike in Lake Tahoe, like on the top of a mountain. I would meet people. I went to go pick up sushi and I would meet a guy and would ask for my number. Like that's when you're on a roll, when you're just literally going around your life and people are like attracted to you and engaging with you without you prompting anything.
Wow. What do you think when you talked about like, okay, I had these sort of traumatic moments and I really needed to process them, or I had these really hard moments in life, like what were some of the root blocks there that you had to look at, maybe for the first time in some of them, or, maybe feeling the emotions attached to the first time? Like what sort of blocks were coming up for you? What programming was coming up for you before you got to that magnetic space?
So, I mean, as I mentioned, I really did all the workshops. I started with how to manifest, then I did shadow, then I did inner child. And I guess for the first time, I was able to look at my relationship with my father. And because my mom's amazing, and my dad, I have so much compassion for him. I really do. And I was able to actually find that through inner child. But he was never around, really. He was a very successful entrepreneur. He'd been a pilot, worked in aviation, but he literally was in the country for less than 6 months of the year. When he was home, it was really unstable because he was an alcoholic, theoretically, a very well-functioning one. He was a narcissist. So, you learn that everything is never their fault. They tend to accuse people a lot of whatever they believe about themselves. It's fascinating. But you're walking on eggshells because you're waiting for the signs that like something's coming and you're going to set them off. And also he had untreated bipolar. So it was this cocktail of instability and insecurity. And I think, he always said, well, I'm making money and that's why I do what I do and I'm doing it for you. And I bought into that. And I was like, okay, I don't have a right to complain. He did this for me and I was lucky with what I've got and never complain. Like that was just not something that I gave myself permission to ever do. So therefore I never dealt with any of it. So opening that up through inner child and exploring and saying, actually, this wasn't okay. And it wasn't normal. It was all I knew. I would watch movies and shows and, be showing like traumatic scenes of people's like parents with drug addiction and having terrible childhoods. And I was like, oh, well, that's not me. Like they had it worse than me. So therefore my experience was nothing because they had it worse. And that's kind of just how I lived my life. I was like, oh, well, I'm not pretty because I'm not the prettiest. I'm not smart because I'm not the smartest. I'm not athletic because I'm not the most athletic. And I kind of lived my life in these extremes.
Yeah, very like black and white thinking, which also makes sense as a child of a narcissistic parent too, because they tend to, depending upon where they are on the spectrum of it, but like they tend to make everything very black and white, like you're good or you're bad, right or wrong, whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. That is, black and white thinking. And I feel like the world tries to make us see things in black and white. Like it's very old fashioned way of viewing things now. And I hope and I believe that we're coming to understand the different shades of gray. And now as he's passed, I think that's something I'm definitely leaning more in towards. And it's fascinating to watch people share their own black and white views of the world, and me being able to now, through doing this work, being able to sit here and watch and not attach anything to people's responses and their reactions to him and his passing, and just be able to like sit here without any attachment to it because I'm content within myself.
When did you first realize that there was something like having these titles for your dad, knowing that he was a functioning alcoholic, untreated bipolar, narcissistic? Like when did you realize that's what it was? Because it sounds like he never came out and was like, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, I'm working on it in therapy. Like it doesn't sound like he had that interaction.
No, never. And one of the first things that actually helped me in terms of building compassion for him was actually doing Inner Child and doing it from his point of view.
Wow.
I've known this story, and I was obviously a more limited version than I did for myself, because you only have a certain amount of knowledge of your parents, especially ones that aren't usually engaged in reality. But I thought about his birth and I was like, he was born under a bed in 1945 at the closing of World War II in Japanese-occupied Malaysia.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, well, like, let's start there. And then I was like, he went to boarding school in the Himalayas, which is a 2-week voyage from his home, like for his entire life almost. And that was a really fascinating thing then to watch. Obviously, he's caused so much pain in my family, and there was a lot of black and white thinking I can see in my family. But I was just like, I have so much compassion for him because, he caused his own suffering and he was never able to fix that. And that's why from a really young age, I've always been on this journey, because I'm like, I don't want to repeat these patterns. I know I have one life. I want to live as many lives and have as many experiences as I possibly can in this lifetime. And I never want to be the author of my own misery. And so I've always looked internally for the answers because I had that experience with him.
It's so beautiful that you can have that transformation, right? Like he had suffering and you can have compassion for him, but also still, I'm sure even when he was alive, like create your own boundaries around interacting with him and validate your experiences for being really unhappy and unsafe while also simultaneously having compassion. Like black and white thinking doesn't allow for both of those things, so that's why those colors of gray are so important.
So important. And, also knowing, I think a lot of people, and I was the same, when you start a journey like TBM, you're like, okay, so I'll do X, Y, and Z, and then I'll be healed. And then everything's going to be magical and easy. And like, okay, I'm done and dusted. And I think, as the brand's evolved, and Lacy's talked a lot about like the layers and peeling back the layers, and it's a constant evolution. I so feel that, because in the past, I would have, been thinking in a very black and white manner. But now, in terms of healing from him, as I mentioned, I did a lot when I was living in the US because I had that space and that distance. But now with his passing, I know that there'll be another level that I can finally access, knowing that he's not around to re-traumatize me or like to put me through the same old stuff. So I've kind of been waiting to do more healing, basically knowing that I'll have some peace to be able to like access stuff that I haven't been able to date, and that's just another layer.
So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else, such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the Pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily, in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the Pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode.
Switching gears a little bit here, when you were unblocking this stuff with your dad, what sort of relationship patterns were popping up? Like, you were having dates pop up or potential suitors, but what dynamic? Like, were they everything on your list? Were they tests? What were they like? How did that present for you?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I feel like this could be a whole episode in itself. You can imagine there was a lot. Like when I was younger, I think I would always look to relationship for validation. And, you know, I would take whatever attention I could get as validation. So, you know, I would date people because the other people would then validate me, being like, yeah, like, wow, like he's amazing. So I'm like, okay. Or conversely, then I had periods as well where I would settle massively and put up with behavior that was just, like, I'm like, why did I do this to myself? But I guess I had so much going on in my career or other areas of my life that, you know, you can often settle in a relationship for longer than is healthy. And then I think in my most recent experience, you know, I had good intentions, but I think, yeah, maybe there was some settling or not believing I could have what I really wanted. Also, obviously for me, anger is a huge trigger for me. So anyone that is jealous or possessive or overly passionate, intensely so, it's always going to be a trigger for me because it has overtones of control. And to me, that was just what I witnessed as abuse in my parents' relationships.
So you feel like you attracted in a few partners that maybe had some of those themes?
Yeah, some of those themes, or conversely, like I think I definitely settled. I had such low self-worth before, and that was before I found Lacy.
And then as you were starting to notice, like, okay, you know, this is a non-negotiable. If this person has an unhealthy behavior with anger, like that's a specific trigger for me. And I know this is not a safe space for me. So I got to get out. Were you able to pass those tests more easily? How did that go?
You know, and I'm like, part of me is like, oh God, like, should you share this? But when I left, like we finished that relationship and he wasn't okay about that and reached out to me, you know, messages 6 a.m. or 10 o'clock at night, you know, so that felt very unstable for me because you just don't know when you're going to get a message, or email once I blocked him, or Facebook. And I knew that he was in pain. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And I, you know, you can tell I love TikTok because I'm like talking about all these concepts on TikTok that people have started talking about, like entering your villain era, which is basically like having boundaries. It's TikTok speak for boundaries and putting yourself first. And yeah. So I was like, but I was like, oh, I get that I look like a villain to you and I look like a witch with a bee and I look like I'm really cold and disconnected. But I was like, that is exactly what I learned from my dad. Is like, I've learned with the help of the TBM work that my dad would like put me in that position of like trying to like manage his emotions. I was like, I'm not. So with my ex, I was like, I'm so sorry you're in pain, but like, I don't owe you anything because you need to learn to manage your own emotions by yourself. which I'm sure that sounds really harsh.
No, I think that sounds really, really strong boundaries and really good self-worth.
Well, I had to in the end, because I just experienced that so much in childhood, was just trying to manage my dad and like walking on eggshells around him and not setting him off, and then dealing with the consequences of his anger and his emotions. So I was like, I'm so sorry, but I can't, and you need to be an adult, and like this will be a hugely beneficial experience for you once you do.
I think that's so important to note. Like, it might not seem like the biggest thing in the world. Like, okay, I block them and I set a boundary. But like, in order for you to do that, you had to go against all the programming that you knew, which was, it is my job to take care of this person. Otherwise, I'm not safe, or I'm not stable, or, you know, whatever your limiting belief was. And so for you to set the boundary and walk away, it probably felt uncomfortable. It probably felt extremely difficult. You probably were like, oh, shoot, like, should I have said it like that, for a little bit? But then eventually you are building up your own self-worth to know, you know what? My emotional well-being is my responsibility and his is his. So I'm allowed to, and I will continue to step towards my own needs. And that's such a powerful thing. I don't think people always notice how meaningful setting those boundaries in even little ways like that can make such a big difference on, you know, what manifests and how you feel about yourself on the other side.
Exactly. And I think, you know, it was the end of 2020. It was a really hard year. It was really triggering for me. I think maybe someone that hadn't had my experiences would be like, okay, it's just a couple of messages, whatever. But for me, I was like, I'm so tired. Like, please leave me alone. Like, I need space. I've just been through so much for so many reasons. I'm exhausted. And at the same time, I had someone break into my car, like, and I've confronted him as well. So I was just like,
wow,
had multiple experiences of being like, okay, like, I don't feel safe and secure. Please leave me alone.
I'm sure you probably went to the DIs with that feeling of not feeling safe and secure at some point. Like, when you're reprogramming on that, what does that look like?
You know, that's a really great question. And you know what I just realized in this last week, Jessica, is like, I've definitely had that on top of my list in terms of manifesting like a fully aligned relationship moving forward, as like having safety and security be characteristics. And now in this last week, because my dad is passed now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can find that for myself, because he's no longer a part of my life. So I think that's my biggest thing. I'm looking to like, okay, how can I bring safety and security into my daily life now moving forward, so I don't need to look for that in somebody else?
Yeah. If you were to comfort your inner child, let's say, in a DI or in a reprogram process or conscious mind, whatever, what would you have said to your inner child who like needed someone to stick up for you or defend you or anything like that?
I definitely use one of the DIs where it's like your older magnetic self goes into your childhood bedroom and can kind of comfort your inner child. And that one, I feel like I've had really like pretty good manifestations like come through after reprogramming that. And that's just like the comforting side. I'm a very independent person. I'm very like driven and ambitious and whatnot. And like I always had like really big dreams as a kid. And so that's what I definitely would go into the DI and be like, look at all this amazing stuff we do. And like, we live in LA now. Like, isn't that amazing? You know, coming from Australia. And like, look how much you've done. And like, you know, you live this like really unique life to you, and you have amazing friends, an amazing dog, an amazing car, like all of this stuff. I was like, you live in Malibu now. How cool. So yeah, it's definitely evolved over the years as I've been doing it. But that one I always go back to because I found a lot of manifestations come through after it.
I love that. We'll have to link it in the show notes too.
Yes. No, I know. It's been really powerful for me. Also, sometimes I'll even expand it and like do like my 18-year-old self as well as my child self, and then my adult self as well.
That's a cool way of thinking about it, because I'm really interested in like parts therapy and internal family systems. I feel like I'm a broken record because I talk about it so much because I just think it's so fascinating. But utilizing some of that in the DIs, bringing forward your angsty teenager self in the DI and be like, what did you need? What were you mad about? Like, what didn't you like? Like, why were you a rebel? Like, why did you do that? And what did you need? And just allowing space to have conversations during the reprogramming part, I think is so helpful.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think, so much of the time we're like, oh, we're 18 or 19, we're an adult, like we know it all and all. And so, but if, now, I mean, I'm 32. So I'm like, okay, you were a kid, you still had so much trauma that you had no even clue about. So I think there's so much unpacking in that space for sure.
So how did some of those other material manifestation come through, like the Malibu guest house, your car, the raise, all of that stuff?
Okay, so the raise was really good because that was just like, I use it as just such a quick example when I'm explaining to my friends the work. I'm like, for example, like, I did a $10,000 raise. And that was really, I've always had a fear of being seen, which I think is inevitable when you grow up in an abusive household. Like being seen means getting into trouble. I was so unconscious of that for so many years. I was like, oh no, like I'm gregarious, I'm bubbly, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm fine, I'm extroverted. But yeah, so I really had to break through that fear of being seen. My core wound underneath all of this work has always been not good enough. And so putting myself out there in career situations where I was like, actually, I'm going to put myself forward for this like speaking gig or to participate in this industry event because I'm good enough, were I think some of the ways that manifestation comes through. I mean, I'd been in the job for 2 months and I got a $10,000 raise without asking for it. So anything is possible. They always like in career, they're always like, no, we do this thing, we do promotions on cycles. Like, no, anything's possible. Don't let other people tell you that.
For that one, was there any certain pattern? Did you have to pass a test? Were you doing an unblocking piece? Like what was kind of that core thing that clicked the dial over to open up that option?
I think it was really, I had just moved to LA, so I just started a new job. And so I was in flow there. I was in flow and setting up my life in LA. And then I think it was taking the action because I felt like then I was in alignment, energetic alignment. But taking the action in terms of putting myself out there to be seen were definitely the key elements from a career perspective. I know we talk about this in the community a lot in terms of taking aligned action, and that there are a lot of people that will just kind of focus on the alignment to the point that they take no action. I'm definitely of the I'm taking action, but it's from the completely wrong energetic space. So I think in that instance, yeah, I definitely had both things down pat. And from my experience, it's so crucial to make sure you're taking action from the right place, because I feel like I've definitely done it a lot and things haven't worked out. Or, I think sometimes also earlier in the process, when you're trying to manifest, you're almost trying to manipulate the universe. And you are like, okay, so if I do this, then this will come through. And it's like, no, because you're not energetically aligned. Like you might have done some work, but like you don't feel that way yet. You're just trying to pretend you feel that way. So understanding the nuance of the intention, I guess, is a huge thing that I've discovered in the journey.
And I think that's so helpful too, of like, okay, if your core wound is I'm not good enough, and part of the way that presents is it's not safe to be seen, and being seen is scary and dangerous and not a good situation, your action is going to be stepping through the fear of like, okay, what are situations where maybe my go-to thing in this moment is to like stay home and chill if I'm invited to some cool networking event. But I know my pattern, and that's I have to step through this fear of being seen. Okay, let me go to this event and then say yes to that and yes to that. And thus the race came through after that.
Exactly. I know. And even finding a job with 4 weeks PTO, that was the same job. And I was like, that's not possible in the US. That's what we get in Australia. So I was like, okay, I wrote my list of what I wanted. And yeah, 4 weeks PTO, I was like, I don't know how that's going to come through, but I'm going to manifest it. And lo and behold, I did without having to ask for it.
That's also really cool to know too. And that's probably something very unique to your patterning, is like your action isn't like someone could say like, okay, the aligned action to get your raise is to go in and ask for it. And that might be some people's pattern. But for you, it's unblock the other pieces, take action on the other limiting beliefs, and then your manifestation will come without you needing to ask for it.
Yeah. And I found that even more recently in my career. Just lately, I've been doing EFT tapping to kind of clear some blocks. I found it's a really beneficial balance to the cerebral kind of TBM work. Brene Brown always talks about like, who has the right to hear your story? And like, be careful about, what you put out there because people might not have the space or the understanding to tell it. But obviously I know like the TBM community is like so aligned in terms of understanding the work, understanding process and doing the work. So I was a little bit nervous, but like since we chatted, like I've also signed a new client, an A-list celebrity brand in the States that I'm helping to launch here in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's crazy how much just using my voice and putting myself out there with the right intention has these ripple effects that I can't even predict, basically.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like your antidote, it's like, okay, like where are the ways that I'm still hiding? One of the main things that Lacy always says, especially when people ask like, oh, how do I grow my social media? It's like, well, where are you hiding? Or where are you afraid to be seen? Because that's such a common place. And I even think about that for myself. I'm like, even thinking of sharing on social or what to say on the podcast, it's been a growth of having to like warm up and be like, okay, I can share this. Oh, look, I'm safe. Everything's good. Okay, let's try again. Share more. Ooh, everything's fine. Okay. And it's like continuing to build that trust muscle.
Exactly. And, I during the pandemic, I joined TikTok and I have a secret TikTok account like none of my friends really know about because I wanted to, start moving through this fear of being seen. So it was like another action step. I knew it was safe in a way, because it's still TikTok, but I knew it was safe because like I wouldn't be concerned about the way my friends would perceive me. And yeah, that had hugely beneficial impacts, like not in terms of business or anything like that, but just for myself. And I loved this work. And so I would literally just share content about my life and this work and like tools that have helped me. And it ended up growing to about 15,000 people, which I worked in Instagram. I work in digital marketing or marketing, but I started Instagram, in 2012 being a social media manager. And that was back when people were like, oh, so you're just going to do Instagram for a job? And I was like, oh, I guess this seems like where marketing's going.
Yeah.
So I'm
good bet.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, now I look back and I'm like, oh, if I just had the confidence and tools like this to back myself, I could have done something, on such a bigger scale. But yeah, I've been on Instagram for so long and I could never be an influencer or never put my content up because I was so afraid of what people would think. With pandemic plus TikTok, I was like, okay, this is your chance to like move through that old narrative.
I love that. And I love the way that you have the secret TikTok that you're actively putting content on. Like a lot of times we talk about having your expander Instagram where you don't necessarily post, but you just follow all your expanders. But this is kind of like the bridge gap for being seen. It's like do it private. So like your friends can't find the account, but you're just active on there anyways and sharing with people that might resonate with that content.
Exactly. And, having been in the social media game for such a long time, I'm like, it's such a fun platform because you're like, wow, like you're scrolling through Instagram. It's like, oh, wow, like I want to go on a holiday. Oh, wow, like I want that outfit. Oh, wow, like I'm not as skinny as her, Scrolling through TikTok, it's like, wow, I never knew that fact. Oh, that's such a great idea. I'm going to bookmark that for later. You just learn or laugh or engage in like such a different way. So it's been like a really healing platform in a way because I know there's so much negativity around it compared to Instagram that I'm like, all my friends are like, I don't know, TikTok. Like, I just can't understand the TikTok. And I'm like, that attitude will give you wrinkles. It's such a fun place.
That's so interesting. I have to give it more of a shot. My thing is it's like information overload. Like I need like a buffer of like a Zen ocean or something in between each video.
Actually, some people put up content like that. It's so funny you say that.
That would be my secret TikTok, just like Zen videos to break up their feed.
I bet you it would become huge too. And I think, that's the thing is just like put boundaries around it because like, yeah, it's designed to be addictive. So, but if you're aware of that, then like you can control that story. It'll give you everything you love. I get French TikTok because I'm a huge Francophile, and I get cooking TikTok, and I get, manifestation TikTok. Yeah. Whereas my friend, like, she'll get like cleaning TikTok.
That is really fascinating because I think there's so much content on there right now, and it's like what you linger on, what you look at, what you like, what you save, you're going to get more of that. So I even do that with Instagram. On the Discover page, I'll look up specifically things that I'm interested in that I want to know and see more of, and then more of that pops up on the Discover page. So it's like a little hack to feed your expansion.
Exactly. I save a lot of my Instagram posts as well. So like I have like a little things to manifest, and I really, use it almost like a Pinterest in a way, basically now.
So how did you manifest the Malibu guest house and your car?
Yeah, so actually Lacey was a huge expander for the car because I was attending the LA event. So it was that like 2019, like late 2019. So yeah, and I saw her drive away and I was like, hell yeah, girl, like get it. And I want that car too one day. And I was like, okay, because, if you'd asked me if I was a kid going back into my inner child DI, oh, like you have a Mercedes, like how do you think you got it? I would have been like, I don't know, like I married rich, like some guy bought it for me, because like that was all I knew. Like that's what my dad did, which sounds so dumb.
But that's what you were that was your programming at that stage. You just got to keep expanding out of that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I got my GLA and I got it for like a really good price. And it's funny because I've actually really shifted in terms of like how I view material manifestations now since then. But it was a huge moment for me because I was like, okay, like I'm independent, I completely fund my life myself, and I have an amazing career, and I did this. And, just being such a Taurus, I was like, this is just, having that physical representation of what I'd achieved was really huge for me. And negotiating all for myself was really, really big for me. And I've witnessed other friends also use the work to manifest exactly the car that they want. And it's been really, really fun to see because they were in the same boat where it's like, wow, they didn't think like having an Audi was possible, but they had done the work as well. And like, they were just like, had their list and they were ready to say like no to everything that was not on their list, basically. There was that one. And then, when I moved to Malibu, it was close to the end of 2020. And I was like, I need to get out of West Hollywood. This has never been my vibe, but it was close to the office. And, I was like, I need another chapter. And just, I think the Australian in me, I was like, Malibu is it. And it's funny because everyone has that perception of Malibu. But if you live there, you see how, like, yes, it's a very nice area, but it's like horse farms and like there's like, such a strong farming community there, basically. And I think that's what everyone misses because they just perceive it as like $90 million clifftop mansions. But it's much more salt of the earth. And it was post-breakup, end of 2020. I knew I was going to move back to Australia. Manifested like a 6-month lease on a guest house, that was surrounded by like orange trees and this beautiful garden. And it was deep in the boo around Point Doom. But it was exactly what I needed in terms of just being able to go to the beach every morning. And at work, I was like, you know what? I'm taking an hour to like go 5 minutes down the road and hike. And just be in like a completely different environment, complete opposite of West Hollywood. So definitely had a lot of tests in terms of like looking at different apartments. I was looking for a really long time around like Santa Monica and Brentwood and like those areas I want to live in. And once I decided on Malibu, I had to do some negotiations and bring the price down. But it was just such a beautiful like Nancy Myers style space with like vaulted ceilings and white walls. And I kind of, now that I'm back in Australia, I was like, wow, I can't believe I did that.
That's awesome. Do you feel like you had to follow pings that led you to that place and to the car?
For my Malibu place, I actually found it on Craigslist. It wasn't even officially listed.
Good tip for anyone out there. If you get a ping for Craigslist, check it out.
Exactly. It's not all sketchy. And yeah, I don't know. Once I saw it, I was like, ooh, this is a big change, but like, this is right.
How often were you doing the DIs?
It really depends on what I'm going through. Like during the pandemic, like every day it was like, have lunch, do a DI, take a nap. So it was really every day when I was going through it at work and just dealing with 2020 in general. I can definitely feel like a little bit less when I'm feeling a bit calmer or more confident. Music is the other thing of just like continuing those feelings and experiences when I'm not in a DI, but like bringing them into like my conscious day-to-days. curating a playlist that I feel like makes me most magnetic, or like if I'm trying to tap into like an emotion and really feel it, really listening into like a certain type of music. I used to have a playlist when I was like, okay, I'm going to quit my job. I used to have a playlist for it.
That's amazing.
Because I was like, this is like kind of painful. But like, listening to like Hold On by Wilson Phillips, or like Walking on Broken Glass by Annie Lennox, like it would just make me laugh and make me happy and like just get my energy up when it was kind of like a difficult situation.
I love that. I think that's so cool. I think music is so helpful. And we were talking about this when we had our initial call, but this idea of like, if you have playlists or songs or music from a certain era, like let's say you have them from your early 20s and you remember what you were like and what you were doing. If you're reprogramming maybe like a version of lower self-worth from that time period, or even if it wasn't in that time period, but you recognize that version in that time period, pop on some music from that era that you felt at that time and start to use the memories of the music to tap into the memories from that time period, because it'll help super speed some of the connections you might need to unblock.
Exactly. If you're feeling frustrated, I'm sorry, Alanis Morissette and like Sheryl Crow, like, I'm like, no one does like angsty, the world music better than the 90s,
Yeah.
like Nirvana. I'm like, and it just helps you create some levity, be like, yeah, this is like a really frustrating moment in my life, but like, we'll get through it, and be able to sit in that discomfort. Music really helped me. I remember I was listening to Ed Sheeran, this is years ago before I even found TBM, and I actually ended up, one of the reasons I broke up with my ex, I was like listening to this song and I was like, oh, Ed Sheeran has this amazing relationship and I want something that feels like that, and this current situation absolutely feels nothing like that. Like I need to end this, because like I want that and I'm not even close. This is not right.
Oh my gosh. How Ed Sheeran song made you break up with your not aligned relationship.
Exactly. I don't know. I have a very vivid imagination. So I guess like I really emotionally connect to music. But hey, that's what the artists, that's what they do it for.
100%. And he was your expander. He was talking about the relationship that you were desiring. And so it was a sign to tap into what you authentically really wanted.
I know, that's so true. I never even thought of him like that. But yeah, like musicians aren't just expanders for their careers. They're expanders for their experiences, for sure.
What's one thing that you would tell someone who's just starting this work or thinking about starting this work and thinking like, oh my gosh, I have so much stuff to cover. Where do I even begin? What do I do?
Yeah.
How would you help them navigate?
Well, for someone that's not traditionally emotionally open, really struggles to like relax and like kind of open themselves up to the discomfort. And I've really learned this in the last week as well, especially because like with my dad's passing, it's been like so up and down. And I realized I'm like, if I just feel this emotion now, I'm going to save myself a lot of trouble down the line. Like save yourself the time, save yourself the energy. I repressed emotions my entire life. And I think sometimes you do need the ability to pigeonhole emotions in order to get through what's right in front of you and to deal with work and to deal with stuff that goes on in life. But then you need the ability to come back to it and open it up and explore that feeling and experience. And that's what the TBM work is here for. But whatever's coming up for you right now, save yourself all of the energy and the time that you're going to waste repressing it. And if you feel it now, you will move past it. I literally had this yesterday where my mum's just gone over to visit my sister who's just had a baby. And I was really sad to see her go, because I've been supporting her through this transition of my dad being really sick, like a lot more than I have ever, because it was a really, really difficult situation. So I'm so used to seeing her. And I just like burst into tears, if I'm honest, because she was going and I wasn't going to see her. And we've just been so connected for the last 9 months. And then, it's funny because then I wasn't trying to repress it when I was like taking her to the airport. I wasn't trying to repress it, the sadness I had of missing her while she's gone, because I'd already expressed it to her and we had this beautiful moment. And I think especially with my dad's passing, it's like when you're grieving, you can never say, I love you enough. Like, no matter how many times you say it, if they know it every single hour of the day, it's still never enough. So it's just expressing everything that you're feeling, whether that's in a journal, whether that's to yourself, whether that's to like a really close friend or a therapist. You will just save so much energy compared to repressing it.
That's such good advice. Ooh, yeah, I'm just thinking about the healing journey and everything you've gone through this week. And I'm so thankful that you were recording this podcast even while going through this really traumatic event this past week.
I know. And I know it's such a trip because I really was like, should I do it? Should I not? Like, give myself the space and the time. But I was like, I don't know. I just felt like the timing was very fortuitous and it was meant to be because grief isn't linear. It's like in my instance, I'm not grieving for what I've lost wholly, like most people, but I'm grieving for what never was. And I knew never will be, but now it really never will be. So I wanted to share that because I think we're going to really start opening up into this conversation as a society. And it's been fascinating to watch people respond to me and react to me and how much of it's their stuff and their discomfort versus anything to do with me. Also just having this experience and these tools and I guess like the emotional maturity I've now gained from all of this work, because God knows it was not pretty like 5 years ago when I first started. You know, it's like easy for me to be like nod and just smile and just be like, yeah, that's true. And just be like, okay, that's you and that's not me and that's okay.
I mean, you can even tell by the way that you are responding and talking about it now, like you have done so much work around this topic. It like really shows. So I'm just like so inspired and proud of you for diving into all of that because it is really hard to look at.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate it. And I guess the other like final thing I would want to mention is like, I think now what I'm doing, well, apart from the fact that now I'm like for the first time in my life, as I mentioned, I'm free to explore stuff that I haven't been able to because he's still been a part of my life. Like I went out to dinner with my family 2 nights ago and I was like, for the first time in our lives, we don't have to think, what is he going to say? How is he going to feel? How are we going to manage this? Is he going to call us and say like, you have to come home now? You know, like free of that control for the first time. So I'm like, oh, wow, like this is going to be like, it sounds so weird, but this is going to be like a new magnetic period for me because I've just released a weight that I've only ever known for 32 years. Which sounds so bizarre to so many people, but when you have a difficult parent, it's a club you're a part of and you think you're the only one, and it's so much bigger than anyone talks about. So I hope that I can share that. And also like, I think moving forward now, I like to like, you know, adapt the work in terms of like giving myself a bit of structure. Do you know about the 7 forms of love, like from ancient Greece?
I don't think so. What is it?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So in ancient Greek, they talk about, 7 different forms of love. So it starts with eros, which is, I think, the romantic, passionate love we often think about. But then there's like philia, which is kind of friendship essentially, but like authentic friendship. And then there's like agape, which is the empathetic universal love. And they kind of consider that like the spiritual kind of like religion, that kind of love. There's pragma, which is like committed companionship love. There's ludus, which is playful, flirtatious love. So like quite young and fun, I guess. There's, I think it's pronounced storge. I never know how to pronounce that one, but it's like unconditional familial love. And then philautia, which is self-love. I've always known about these concepts since I was a teenager, but I think that kind of just came up in my world again. And I was like, that seems like a really good place to just focus on for this next chapter, you know, cultivating all these different forms as a healing.
I love that. So you're kind of going to take those themes as sort of your new list and be like, what does each of these types of love mean to me? What would the highest form of them look like? And how do I unblock, expand, take line action towards them?
Exactly. And also, you know, so it's not just like about finding a romantic relationships, but it's like having friendships that fulfill that, and family, and like really healing family relationship in that. It covers all areas of your life even than just one romantic relationship.
What a cool way to approach the work. This is what I love the process. It's so cool to see how people navigate and how they heal and move through it. It's awesome.
Yeah. I know. I think that's a new evolution for me. In the past few months, I've really experienced that I used to have no self-discipline. Actually, one of my exes would always be like, you have appalling self-discipline. I was like, it's true. I really do. And I really feel like the level of your self-discipline is highly reflective of your level of self-worth. So I would always do these little tests where I'll be like, okay, 30 days, I'm not going to drink. 30 days, I'm going to study French every day. 30 days, I'm going to do this. 30 days, I'm going to have do 12,000 steps. And I would really be like a little like test of like something I wanted to like achieve. And if I could do it for 30 days, it was like my little, personal test of where is my self-worth at? What do I need to work on?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ooh, I want to test this theory. This is so fascinating.
I don't know, maybe it's not accurate, but I was definitely seeing my self-discipline increase as I've done this work.
I'm also now thinking, I'm like, okay, what would that happen for like my fiance with ADHD? Like, was that equate the same, or was he needs a little tweak to that process? But
that's so true, actually. Yeah.
But it could definitely work for some. So you guys could maybe try it out and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gabriella. This has been so fun and so expansive. And thank you again for being so vulnerable and open and sharing your story and sharing about the relationship with your dad, especially so close to his passing. I think it's going to help really expand other people who feel in similar situations as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And just thank you to yourself and Lacy and the whole like TBM team. I mean, everyone is, I just feel like creating such huge shifts in people in the world. And it always reminds me of when I first started my journey in spirituality and discovering the Marianne Williamson quote, the iconic one from A Return to Love. And when she says, as you let your own light shine, you unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. And I think that, you and the whole TBM team doing this work just allows so many people's lights to help shine. So it's going to change the world, and we need the world to change.
Let's do it. Woo! Well, thank you again, and we'll see you all next week. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, we did. And in case you're not totally ready to join the pathway yet, I wanted to share a few of our free offerings that I'll often suggest to people as a little bit of a blueprint to get them started on their manifestation journey. The first place I like to direct people completely for free is the motivation. You can see it linked below or on our homepage as our testimony library. And it's categorized by different subjects, whether you're calling in career, money, love, wellness, and much more. When you're reading about a member's experience of what they manifested, you're actually seeing to believe and showing your subconscious that that very thing is possible for you. The second place I like to direct people is to the free clarity exercise, which is also linked below. In it, you get to try our own unique hypnosis process, learn about the science, and some journaling prompts. And the best part about this, you'll get a tiny taste of what it's like to go into your hypnotic state, bring your subconscious forward, and create new neural pathways while receiving clarity. And the third thing, if you haven't listened to it on this podcast yet, please go back to the episode titled Manifestation 101, where you'll learn the basics of neural manifestation to truly understand this process. So go ahead and check out those free resources, the motivation, the free clarity exercise, and the episode Manifestation 101, all linked below. And in an effort to make sure to have representation in this process series, go ahead and submit any process testimonials you have, especially to our LGBTQ+ community, our BIPOC, as well as the Ys, which is anyone in the community who is 45 and over. All right, we'll be back next week.